Welcome to Power in Words. Here we gather not merely to listen, but to remember the quiet, enduring strength that resides within each of us. This space is deeply dedicated to inspiration, to the transmission of positive energy, and to a profound emotional understanding that connects us all, no matter where we are in the world. Think of this as a sanctuary, a quiet room where you can step away from the relentless noise of the outside world and set down the heavy psychological baggage you have been carrying for so long. You are not just a viewer looking at a screen. You are a fellow traveler on this complex journey of being human. Our purpose here is to help you feel seen, to gently awaken your inner resilience, and to walk alongside you as a friend would. Today, we are going to look closely at something that touches the core of every single human life. We are going to explore the weight of the past. We are not talking about nostalgic, golden memories. It is the heavy, uninvited weight that has fundamentally shaped your worldview. The experiences you never asked for, the hurts you did not deserve, and the narratives written for you long before you knew how to hold the pen and write your own story. So many of us walk through our daily lives feeling like echoes of what happened to us years or even decades ago. We carry the invisible architecture of old wounds into new relationships, into our workplaces, and into the lonely evenings we spend by ourselves. You might find yourself sitting in the stillness of your room, wondering why a harmless comment made you shrink inside, or why the prospect of achieving a long-held dream suddenly fills you with a paralyzing sense of imposter syndrome. It is deeply human to feel this way, and you are not broken for experiencing it. We are all, in many significant respects, the cumulative result of our histories. Yet, the greatest psychological awakening we can ever experience is the profound realization that our history, no matter how painful, does not have the final say in who we are becoming. To truly understand who we are right now, we have to bravely acknowledge the reality of what has been done to us. From the moment we arrive in this world, we are subjected to immense forces entirely outside of our control. We are born into families that carry their own unhealed generational traumas, placed into societies with rigid expectations, and subjected to the random unpredictability of circumstance. Perhaps you grew up in a home where love felt conditional, where you learned at a young age that safety meant staying quiet, or that your inherent worth was entirely dependent on your achievements. Maybe you trusted someone deeply, pouring your heart into a relationship, only to have that trust fractured, leaving you with a lingering protective suspicion of anyone who tries to get close to you now. Or perhaps life simply handed you a series of overwhelming setbacks that made the world feel fundamentally unsafe. As a clinical psychologist who has spent decades sitting across from individuals navigating the labyrinth of the human mind, I have seen that the common thread binding these experiences is a profound, debilitating sense of powerlessness. When we are young, or when we are vulnerable, we absorb these painful experiences not just as isolated memories, but as absolute unshakable truths about ourselves. If we were abandoned, our developing brains conclude that we are fundamentally unlovable. If we were overly criticized by those who were supposed to nurture us, we internalize that harsh voice and tragically mistake it for our own internal conscience. This is the heavy lifting of the human condition. It is utterly exhausting to live your entire life inside a story that someone else wrote for you, especially when that narrative casts you in the role of the victim or the fundamentally flawed. You might find yourself endlessly scrolling through your phone late at night, observing the carefully curated lives of others, feeling a cold, quiet isolation settling deep in your chest. You wonder why it is so incredibly difficult for you to simply exist in the world without this pervasive, underlying anxiety. The truth is, your mind is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is trying to protect you based on the painful data it gathered from your past. But that psychological protection has inadvertently become an emotional prison, locking you away from the fullness of life. The deepest tragedy is not just that we are wounded by life, but that we so often build our entire identities around those very wounds. We unconsciously repeat familiar patterns of suffering because familiar pain is somehow less terrifying to the brain than the vast, unpredictable unknown of healing. We sabotage our own success, retreating right before we achieve our goals, because feeling like an imposter is a familiar ache, whereas stepping into our true potential requires a terrifying level of visibility. We push away healthy affection because the fear of eventual rejection feels far more devastating than the predictable ache of chronic loneliness. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung once profoundly observed that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. Think about how often you have looked at a repeated failure in your life, finding yourself in the exact same kind of toxic relationship dynamic or experiencing the same pattern of giving up just before a major breakthrough, and resigned yourself to the depressing idea that this is simply who you are. This quiet resignation is the ultimate invisible cage. It is the insidious belief that because you were heavily shaped by external forces, you are forever bound by them. Acknowledging that we were wronged, that life was profoundly unfair, and that we were robbed of opportunity is a necessary, intensely valid part of the grieving process. We absolutely must feel that anger and that sorrow. However, there is a dangerous psychological trap in making a permanent home in that space of victimhood. When we define ourselves exclusively by what was done to us, we inadvertently hand over all of our personal power to the very people and circumstances that hurt us. We remain in a perpetual, exhausting state of reaction, secretly waiting for the world to finally apologize, to finally recognize our pain, and to finally make it right. But the incredibly liberating truth of adulthood is that the apology you are waiting for may never come. The universe does not automatically balance its ledgers. The people who profoundly misunderstood you may never possess the emotional capacity to understand you. If you spend your life waiting for the past to fix itself, you will tragically sacrifice the only thing you actually possess, which is your future. This brings us to the most profound turning point of human existence, a concept beautifully captured by the existential philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre when he stated that freedom is what you do with what has been done to you. This single sentence holds the astonishing power to completely rewire how we view our lives. Notice carefully that Sartre does not deny the harsh reality of our wounds. He does not suggest that we should ignore the pain, minimize the trauma, or engage in a toxic positivity that demands we just smile and blindly move on. What has been done to you is fully acknowledged as a concrete, unchangeable historical reality. The past is carved in stone, immune to our wishes for it to be different. But the brilliance of the thought is that the sentence does not end there. The psychological hinge upon which your entire life swings is the word freedom. Freedom, in this deep existential and psychological sense, is not the complete absence of emotional baggage. It is not a magical state where you are suddenly entirely free from fear or the haunting memories of your history. Rather, freedom is the active, deliberate, and often fiercely difficult choice of how you respond to the hand you were dealt. It is the sacred, unassailable space between the painful stimulus of your past and the conscious response of your future. Imagine your life as a plot of land that was handed down to you. Perhaps previous generations dumped toxic soil there or simply left it completely barren. You did not ask for the land to be ruined. It is fundamentally unfair that you are the one who has to clean up a mess you did not create. But the sobering realization of emotional maturity is understanding that while the mess is not your fault, the land is still yours. It belongs to you now, and only you. If you spend the rest of your life standing at the edge of the property, yelling into the void at the people who ruined it, the land will simply remain a wasteland. Freedom begins the exact moment you stop shouting and pick up a shovel. It is the grueling, unglamorous, yet magnificent work of clearing the debris of old beliefs and conditioning the soil of your mind with self-compassion. It is deciding, with quiet courage, what beautiful things you will now choose to plant. Reclaiming this profound personal agency is rarely a cinematic epiphany that cures your emotional pain overnight. It is a slow, methodical, and deeply courageous process of unlearning. It requires you to bravely look at your deepest insecurities and gently but firmly ask yourself whose voice is actually speaking. When that suffocating wave of self-doubt washes over you just before a major job interview, or when you feel the overwhelming urge to pull away from a loving partner, You have to learn to pause in that highly uncomfortable space. You have to recognize that the fear belongs to the past, but the choice of how to act belongs entirely to the present. You were perhaps explicitly taught or implicitly led to believe that you were inadequate or not enough. But freedom is exactly what you do with that false teaching today. Do you blindly continue to echo it, reinforcing the cage? Or do you stand in front of the mirror, look yourself directly in the eyes, and consciously speak a new truth into existence? The great psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who endured the unimaginable horrors of a concentration camp, understood this psychological reality better than anyone. He realized through his immense suffering that everything can be taken from a human being, but one crucial thing, which is the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. If Frankl could discover a profound sense of agency in the darkest abyss of human history, then surely we can find the quiet strength within ourselves to rewrite our own internal narratives. This monumental task requires an almost radical amount of self-compassion. You have to be incredibly gentle with yourself as you stumble, because learning to walk freely after spending years feeling emotionally bound is an inherently clumsy endeavor. You will inevitably have days where the old scripts aggressively take over, where the phantom pain of old injuries flares up, and you react out of raw fear rather than conscious freedom. That does not mean you are failing, and it certainly does not mean you are broken beyond repair. It simply means you are actively engaged in the messy, non-linear work of healing. The goal of this journey is not absolute perfection, but expanding awareness. It is the dignified act of taking full ownership of your own mind. It means doing the hard work of setting firm boundaries with people who stubbornly insist on interacting with the old, wounded version of you. It means consciously stopping the toxic habit of comparing your complex reality with the filtered highlight reels of everyone else on the internet. Your deeply personal journey of reclamation cannot be measured against someone else's artificial timeline. You are building an entirely different kind of psychological architecture now. You are meticulously building a self that is rooted not in what was tragically inflicted upon it, but in what it has bravely chosen to become. There is a breathtaking beauty in a person who has taken the broken pieces of their past and deliberately arranged them into a stunning mosaic of resilience. The people who possess true emotional gravity and unshakable inner peace are almost always those who have suffered profoundly, yet vehemently refuse to let that suffering be the final punctuation mark of their story. They have taken heavy grief and crushing failures and, through the sheer force of human vulnerability, alchemize those dark elements into profound wisdom and unyielding purpose. As you move forward from this exact moment, carry this empowering truth into your daily life. When the pull of the past tries to drag you backward into old despairs, remind yourself firmly that the steering wheel is now entirely in your hands. You possess the inherent right and the extraordinary capability to decide exactly who you are going to be today. Acknowledge everything you have survived, honor the scars you carry, and turn your gaze forward. The past is nothing more than the raw material from which you will forge your masterpiece. Your freedom begins the moment you decide your history is a place of reference, not a place of residence. If you found a piece of your own story in these words today, please like this video, share it with someone who might need this gentle reminder, and subscribe to Power in Words so we can continue walking this beautiful path of growth together.